A pregnant wife sits alone at an anniversary dinner she spent hours preparing. The candles have burned down to nothing. The food is cold, and her phone shows exactly where her husband has been for the past 4 hours. Room 2014 at the Meridian Hotel. But here's what makes this story different. She doesn't cry. She doesn't call him. She doesn't confront him. Instead, she opens her laptop and pulls up a spreadsheet titled Evidence Walker Divorce. Because Jenny Walker isn't just any wife, she's a forensic accountant. And for the past 2 weeks, she's been building a case that will destroy her husband's entire life in less than 12 hours. By morning, he'll try to come home and find the locks changed. By noon, he'll be arrested at his office in front of every colleague he's ever known. By evening, he'll be in jail, fired, disbarred, and national news, all because he underestimated the woman he married. This is the true story of how one woman executed the perfect revenge, not with drama, not with emotion, but with cold, calculated precision. How she turned the tables on a predator. How she protected her unborn son from a monster disguised as a lawyer. And how sometimes the most dangerous thing you can call a woman is boring. This is after a night with his mistress. His pregnant wife changed the locks and sent police to his office. And trust me, you've never heard a story like this before. The city lights of Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds through the floor-to-ceiling windows of room 2014 at the Meridian Hotel. Jonathan Walker lay in the king-size bed, his $3,000 suit crumpled on the floor like his marriage vows. At 38, he still possessed the confident swagger of a man who'd never truly faced consequences for his actions. Beside him, Carrie Delacroix traced lazy patterns across his chest with manicured fingernails. At 29, she was stunning in the calculated way of women who'd learned to weaponize their beauty. Her auburn hair cascaded over her bare shoulders, but her green eyes held a coldness that John was too self-absorbed to notice. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a text message. "Where are you? Dinner is cold." "Jenny." John silenced the phone without reading it and tossed it aside like the inconvenience it represented. "When are you finally going to leave her?" Carrie asked, her voice honey-smooth but edged with impatience. John laughed, the sound echoing his arrogance. "After the baby comes." Can't look like the villain in a divorce with his pregnant wife. Public perception matters in my line of work. Carrie's lips curved into a sharp smile. "Sweetheart, you already are the villain. I'm just helping you profit from it." John pulled her closer, missing entirely the predatory calculation in her expression. To him, this was just another Thursday night. Another lie, another woman who wasn't his wife. He had no idea that 20 miles away in Westchester County, his entire world was about to implode. In the Walker residence, a $4 million colonial mansion inherited from her late father, Jenny Walker sat alone at their formal dining table. At 34 and 7 months pregnant, she still carried herself with quiet elegance, though exhaustion shadowed her hazel eyes. The anniversary dinner she'd spent hours preparing had gone cold. 8 years of marriage, and she'd set the table with their best china, lit candles that had burned down to stubs, and opened a bottle of expensive wine she couldn't drink. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone rested on the table, open to the Find My iPhone app. A blue dot pulsed steadily on the screen, showing John's location at the Meridian Hotel in downtown Manhattan. He'd been there since 7:30. It was now nearly midnight. Jenny's face showed no tears, no shock. No dramatic breakdown, just cold, calculated fury and the steely determination of a woman who'd finally had enough. She opened her laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet she'd been building for 2 weeks. The file name read, Evidence Walker Divorce. Tabs lined the bottom of the screen. Hotel charges, jewelry purchases, unexplained cash withdrawals, GPS tracking data, suspicious contacts. Each tab told a story. Each entry represented another lie. Each receipt was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. Jenny placed both hands on her pregnant belly, feeling her son kick as if he sensed her resolve. "I'm done waiting," she whispered to her unborn child. "I'm done being naive. Tomorrow, everything changes." She closed the laptop and made a phone call. "Martin's locksmith? Yes, I need all the locks changed on my house first thing in the morning. 6 a.m. I'll pay double for the early call, cash." The second call went to her lawyer. Washington, it's Jenny Walker. Yes, I know it's late. I need you to file the divorce papers tomorrow morning. Everything we discussed. No, I'm not changing my mind. In Washington, call Detective Torres. Tell her it's time to move on the embezzlement charges. The third call went to Harrison Blackstone, managing partner at John's law firm. Mr. Blackstone, this is Jennifer Walker. I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know. Your partner, Jonathan Walker, has been stealing from client escrow accounts. I have documentation. $380,000. I'll bring everything to your office tomorrow afternoon, after the police arrest him. Jenny ended the call and looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back at her was someone new, someone harder, someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to strike first. She climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, but she didn't go to sleep. Instead, she packed John's belongings into boxes and left them by the garage door. Then she sat in the nursery she'd been preparing for their son, rocking slowly in the chair her father had bought before he died. Your daddy thinks he's so smart, she told her belly. He thinks I'm the naive little wife who gave up her career to support his. He forgot that I was a forensic accountant. He forgot that I'm very, very good at following money. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Jenny didn't move from the rocking chair. She was waiting, planning, preparing for the moment when Jonathan Walker would try to come home and find that home no longer existed for him. Across town in room 2014, John finally dozed off, completely unaware that he'd just spent his last night as a free man. At 6:47 in the morning, Jonathan Walker drove through the tree-lined streets of Westchester County, his BMW's engine purring like his self-satisfaction. He'd left the Meridian at 5:30, stopped at his office to shower and change into fresh clothes from the spare suit he kept there, and now he was rehearsing his alibi. Emergency client meeting, he muttered to himself, checking his appearance in the rearview mirror. Henderson case ran late. You know how demanding Morrison can be. He'd lied successfully dozens of times before. Jenny always believed him. Sweet, trusting Jenny, who'd given up her career as a forensic accountant to support his rise through the ranks at Blackstone and Associates, who'd suffered through 2 miscarriages without complaint, who waited at home with cold dinners and warm forgiveness. She was so predictable, so manageable, so boring. He pulled into the circular driveway of the colonial mansion, noting absently that it looked the same as always. Beautiful, expensive, bought entirely with Jenny's inheritance after her father died, though John had long ago started thinking of it as his. He took out his house key, the one attached to the Tiffany keychain Jenny had given him for their 5th anniversary, and inserted it into the front door lock. It didn't turn. John frowned and tried again, jiggling the key. Nothing. He examined the key, making sure it was the right one. It was, but the lock had been changed. A cold finger of unease traced down his spine. He walked around to the back door. Same problem. The garage door opener flashed access denied when he tried it. Every window was locked. John's confidence began to crack. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. He rang the doorbell, then knocked, then pounded. Jenny, honey, what's going on? Are you okay? Is it the baby? Inside the house, Jenny stood 5 feet from the door, watching through the peephole. She'd showered, dressed in a navy maternity suit, done her hair and makeup. She looked calm, prepared, powerful. She took a deep breath and opened the door 6 inches. The chain lock remained engaged. You don't live here anymore, she said, her voice cold and steady. John's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, then his default, righteous anger. What? Jenny, what are you talking about? I'm exhausted. Just let me in and we can talk about whatever's bothering you. Room 2014, the Meridian Hotel. You were there from 7:34 p.m. until 5:47 this morning. The color drained from John's face. For 3 full seconds, he said nothing. Then he pivoted to outrage. You're tracking me? Jesus, Jenny, this is insane. You're being paranoid. It's the pregnancy hormones. You're not thinking clearly. Jenny didn't flinch. Your location, your texts, your credit card charges. $43,000 spent on her in 6 months. Hotels, jewelry, weekend trips to Miami. She slid a thick manila envelope through the 6-inch gap in the door. Divorce papers. You've been served. My attorney will contact yours. John's hands shook as he caught the envelope. Jenny, wait. Think about our baby. Think about what you're doing to our family. I am thinking about our baby, John. That's exactly why I'm done. He tried a softer approach, the one that had worked before. Please, let's just talk about this like adults. I can explain everything. You're right. Let's be adults. Jenny's voice remained eerily calm. Read page 12, section 4. That's the part where you're also being reported for embezzlement. What? I'm a forensic accountant, remember? The career you convinced me to give up? I found the $380,000 you stole from client escrow accounts. Harrison Blackstone has all the evidence. He's waiting for you at the office. John's face went from red to white to gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. Oh, and John, the neighbors already know. I told them yesterday, so don't bother playing the victim. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked with a finality that echoed through John's chest. He stood on what used to be his porch, staring at the closed door. The envelope in his hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He opened it with shaking fingers. Divorce petition, asset division documents. Evidence appendix running to 250 pages. The first page featured a time-stamped photograph of him and Carrie entering the Meridian Hotel. His phone began buzzing with notifications, but he couldn't process them. His brain had short-circuited. Desperate, he walked to the neighbor's house. Patricia Anderson, the 62-year-old widow who'd known Jenny for years, opened the door with her arms already crossed. Patricia, thank God, I need to use your phone. Jenny's locked me out. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. Patricia's expression could have frozen fire. She called me yesterday, Jonathan. Told me you'd show up with exactly that story. She's not well. The pregnancy is making her paranoid, and she showed me the hotel receipts and the GPS data. And honestly, John, I never liked you anyway. You always looked at my daughter's legs during cookouts. The door slammed in his face. He tried Bob Mitchell next, the finance guy 2 houses down. Bob answered the door with his phone already recording. Jenny asked me to review your asset transfers, Bob said flatly. I called my lawyer. You're screwed, buddy. The Thompsons wouldn't even open their door. Through the window, the husband mouthed silently, we're on her side. John realized with growing horror that Jenny had controlled the narrative. She'd told everyone first. She'd positioned herself as the victim and him as the villain before he even knew the game had started. He stumbled back to his BMW and tried to start it. The dashboard lit up with an error message. Vehicle disabled, contact fleet management. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone to call the company fleet manager. Mr. Walker, your company vehicle access has been suspended pending investigation, the manager said, his voice professional but cold. Investigation? What investigation? Mr. Blackstone specifically requested your vehicle be disabled. A tow truck is en route to collect it. The line went dead. John stood in his driveway, Jenny's driveway, with no house, no car, and no way home. He pulled out his personal phone and called an Uber, his fingers fumbling with the app. The driver who picked him up kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Hey, aren't you that lawyer who just says drive, John snapped. He had to get to the office. Harrison would understand. This was all a misunderstanding. Jenny was having some kind of pregnancy-induced psychotic break. He'd explain everything. It would be fine. It had to be fine. But deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge, John knew that nothing would ever be fine again. The offices of Blackstone and Associates occupied the 47th floor of a glass tower on Wall Street. It was the kind of address that impressed clients and intimidated opponents. John had worked there for 6 years, climbing steadily toward partnership. He'd made them millions. He was untouchable, or so he'd thought. The Uber dropped him at the building entrance. John walked through the lobby like a man going to his execution, though he didn't know it yet. He approached the security desk and scanned his access badge. The scanner flashed red. Denied. Cease security. Ramon, the security guard who'd greeted John every morning for 6 years, wouldn't meet his eyes. Sir, your building access has been revoked, but Mr. Blackstone is expecting you. You'll need an escort. 2 additional security guards appeared, flanking John like he was a criminal. Lawyers in the lobby stopped and stared. Whispers followed him to the elevator. Is that Walker? I heard he got arrested. Something about embezzlement. His wife found out. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt like descending into hell in reverse. When the doors opened, the entire office had gone silent. Paralegals froze mid-step. Junior associates stared from their cubicles. His secretary, Paulo, who'd worked for him for 6 years, looked like she'd been crying. Michael Rodriguez, John's closest friend at the firm, stepped into his path. John, man, what did you do? John couldn't answer. The words stuck in his throat. The security guards escorted him to Harrison Blackstone's corner office. The founding partner sat behind his massive mahogany desk like a king delivering judgment. At 63, Harrison had silver hair, penetrating blue eyes, and the kind of power that came from building an empire over 4 decades. Sit down, Jonathan, Harrison said. His tone allowed no argument. John sat. His legs wouldn't have held him much longer anyway. Harrison slid an iPad across the desk. The screen displayed a grid of documents, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, hotel receipts on company credit cards, expense reports for romantic dinners billed as client meetings, GPS data from the company vehicle, jewelry purchases charged to the firm. Your wife came to see me 3 days ago, Harrison said. Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. She brought a forensic accountant, a lawyer, and 6 months of documentation. John's world tilted sideways. She sat exactly where you're sitting now, Harrison continued. You know what she said? John couldn't speak. Harrison's expression hardened. She said, Mr. Blackstone, my husband is stealing from your firm. I'm here because you deserve to know before I file for divorce. He's stealing from your clients. They deserve justice. And honestly, I want him to lose everything. The marriage, the money, the career, the reputation, everything. John found his voice. Harrison, please, let me explain. She gave me 3 days. She asked me to let you think you were safe, to let you have one last night believing you'd gotten away with it. Today is the 3rd day. I can pay it back. I'll resign. Just give me time to. Your wife made a different choice. Behind John, the office door opened. He turned to see 2 NYPD detectives entering. Detective Lisa Torres, mid-40s and sharp-eyed, and Detective James Burke, a veteran cop with the weary expression of a man who'd seen it all. Jonathan Michael Walker, Detective Torres said. Wait, Harrison, you said I had a choice. I said I'd give you a choice. Your wife called them yesterday. She was less forgiving. Mr. Walker, Detective Torres continued, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and theft. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. I'm a lawyer. You can't just... Detective Burke already had the handcuffs out. Lawyer, huh? Then you know exactly how screwed you are. The cold steel closed around John's wrist with a click that sounded like the closing of a tomb. They walked him through the office in handcuffs. Every colleague watched. Phones appeared, recording his humiliation. Paula was openly crying now. A summer intern gasped. Senior partner David Brennan just shook his head with disgust. In the lobby, news cameras were already waiting. Jenny had tipped them off. 3 news vans, CBS, NBC, and local NY1. Mr. Walker, is it true you embezzled $380,000 to support a mistress while your wife is 7 months pregnant? Mr. Walker, did you steal from your clients? Is your wife divorcing you? John kept his head down as they pushed him into the police car, but the cameras caught everything. His disheveled appearance, his handcuffs, the complete destruction of the man he'd pretended to be. Inside the cruiser, his phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Email from Blackstone HR. Employment terminated, effective immediately. New York State Bar Association. Ethics complaint filed. LinkedIn. Your account has been restricted. News alert. Prominent Manhattan attorney arrested for embezzlement. Twitter trending, #Mistress lockout. Text from his mother. Jonathan, what have you done? I'm seeing you on the news. Text from Carrie. What the actual hell, John? They're asking about me. What did you tell them? John's phone slipped from his shaking hands. Through the window, he watched his world disappear as the police car pulled away from the curb. News helicopters circled overhead. On the building's news ticker, the breaking story scrolled past. Blackstone attorney arrested for $380,000 embezzlement. In the holding cell at Manhattan Criminal Court 2 hours later, John sat with drug dealers and drunk drivers. His Rolex, a gift from Jenny for their 5th anniversary, sat in a plastic bag with his other belongings. A cellmate named Carlos, street smart and amused, nodded toward the TV mounted on the wall. The news was playing John's arrest on repeat. "What you in for, suit?" "Misunderstanding," Jain mumbled. "I'm a lawyer. This will all be cleared up." Carlos laughed. "Lawyer in jail? Damn, you really messed up." He watched the screen, then laughed harder. "Bro, you're famous. And your pregnant wife busted you? Yo, she's a savage." Other inmates gathered around the TV, pointing and laughing. John closed his eyes, but he couldn't block out the sound of his own voice from the news footage, stammering denials that no one believed. 12 hours ago, he'd been on top of the world, lying in bed with his mistress, confident and untouchable. Now he was in jail, arrested by the wife he'd underestimated, destroyed by the woman he'd considered boring and manageable. Jenny Walker had executed the perfect revenge, and John Walker finally understood that he'd never really known his wife at all. In a luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton in White Plains, Jenny Walker sat at a desk with her lawyer, Washington Reed. At 58, Washington had silver hair, expensive suits, and the kind of reputation that made opposing counsel nervous. He'd handled over 200 high-profile divorces and never lost. His laptop was open to a document titled Operation Exit Strategy Timeline. "Walk me through how you pulled this off," Washington said, genuine admiration in his voice. "In 30 years, I've never seen anyone execute a divorce this precisely." Jenny smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wasn't executing a divorce, Washington. I was executing justice." She pulled up a series of files and began her explanation. As she talked, Washington's respect grew with each revelation. 2 weeks ago, I found the first hotel receipt," Jenny began. "It was in John's suit pocket while I was doing laundry. The Meridian Hotel, room 2014. $847.50. She clicked to show a photograph of the receipt. My hand was shaking when I found it. But then I remembered, I'm a forensic accountant, or I was before John convinced me to give up my career. I know how to look for patterns. The next slide showed bank statements. 12 days ago, I started the investigation. Joint account means joint access, which is legal in New York State. I downloaded everything. 6 months of statements, every transaction, every charge, every unexplained withdrawal. Washington leaned forward, engrossed. 10 days ago, I hired Marcus Pemberton, the forensic accountant specialist. He analyzed John's spending patterns. The embezzlement became obvious within hours. John was using the firm's American Express for personal expenses. That's fraud. The evidence mounted as Jenny continued. 8 days ago, I went directly to Harrison Blackstone, not to get permission, to get access. As managing partner, Harrison has the authority to authorize compliance investigations. He signed a document making me an official investigator for the firm. Washington whistled low. That was brilliant. Everything you found became admissible evidence. Exactly 6 days ago, with legal access, I pulled everything. GPS data from John's company vehicle, hotel security footage, which I subpoenaed through you, financial records going back 2 years. I had 6 months of solid proof the GPS doesn't lie. She pulled up a map showing John's location history, color-coded by date. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, his car appeared at the Meridian Hotel when his calendar showed client meetings across town. 4 days ago, I met with Detective Torres and handed over everything. She said it was ironclad. I told her to wait until Friday morning, after John spent Thursday night with Carrie. I wanted him to feel safe first. I wanted him to have one last night thinking he'd gotten away with it. Washington shook his head in amazement, cold-blooded and brilliant. 3 days ago, I hired the locksmith, changed every lock on the house. The house is in my name only, inherited from my father. John has no legal claim to it. 2 days ago, I visited all the neighbors. I told them the truth before John could spin his lies. I showed them proof. I knew he'd try to paint me as crazy, so I made sure everyone knew the facts first. Jenny's expression hardened. Yesterday morning, I watched from the window as John tried his key. I watched him panic. Then I called Detective Torres and told her to move in. She closed the laptop. And this morning I watched him lose everything. Washington sat back in his chair. You're terrifying, Jenny. Remind me never to cross you. A news alert popped up on Jenny's phone. Jonathan Walker denied bail. Flight risk. For the first time in weeks, Jenny allowed herself a genuine smile. It's not over yet, but it's a good start. She stood and moved to the window, looking out over White Plains. Her hand rested on her pregnant belly, feeling her son kick. Your daddy thought mommy was weak, she whispered. He's learning differently now. But even as satisfaction washed over her, Jenny felt the exhaustion of the past 2 weeks catching up. She'd barely slept. The stress of the investigation, the planning, the constant vigilance to make sure John didn't suspect anything, it had all taken a toll. Washington must have noticed. Go rest, Jenny. The arraignment is Monday. I'll handle everything until then. Jenny nodded, but she knew the rest wouldn't come easily, because somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered a warning. Men like John Walker don't go down without a fight. And she'd just declared war on a man who had nothing left to lose. She pushed the thought aside. She'd won. John was in jail. The divorce would be finalized within weeks. Full custody was guaranteed. She was safe. Or so she thought. In Soho, in an expensive loft apartment that John's money had paid for, Carrie Delacroix paced like a caged animal. She was 12 weeks pregnant, a fact she hadn't yet shared with John, and watching her carefully constructed world collapse on 3 different screens. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Caitlin Marie Anderson, a professional female voice said. Carrie froze. That was her real name, the name she hadn't used in 7 years. Who is this? Detective Lisa Torres, NYPD Fraud Division. We need to talk about Jonathan Walker and about your activities in Nevada, Florida, and Texas. Carrie's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. You have outstanding warrants in 3 states, Ms. Morrison. Fraud, identity theft, extortion. We can do this easy or hard, your choice. Carrie hung up and ran. Out the fire escape, down the alley, into the subway. She had go bags ready, she always did. Fake IDs, cape-dash, a change of clothes. Within an hour, she was on a bus to Canada. Within 2 hours, she was in custody at the Port Authority bus station, arrested before she could reach the border. In an interrogation room the next morning, Carrie sat across from Detectives Torres and Burke with a public defender who looked overwhelmed. Caitlin, Detective Torres said gently, you're in a lot of trouble. 3 state warrants, federal fraud charges, possible. You're looking at 15 to 20 years. Carrie's eyes filled with tears, not for herself, for the baby growing inside her. Another child born to a mother in prison, history repeating itself. I didn't do anything John didn't want me to do, she whispered. Then help us understand John, Detective Torres replied. Help us, and we'll help you. The deal was simple. Full immunity on the New York charges. Reduced sentences in other states, probably probation. In exchange, she'd testify against Jonathan Walker. Carrie thought about the man who'd gotten her pregnant, who'd offered her $10,000 to terminate, who'd told her he was very good at destroying women's credibility. She thought about Jenny Walker, 7 months pregnant, fighting for her child. She made her choice. I'll testify, Carrie said. I'll tell you everything. And as she began her recorded statement, laying out 6 months of evidence against John, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of redemption. Monday morning found Jenny in Washington Reed's law office reviewing the case with the lawyer and Marcus Pemberton, the forensic accountant who'd helped her document John's crimes. Carrie's testimony is devastating, Washington said, spreading documents across the conference table. She has recordings of John admitting to embezzlement, GPS data, financial records, text messages where he discusses framing you as mentally unstable. Jenny leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to relax. So we're done? It's over? Washington nodded. John's lawyer will try to negotiate a plea deal. My guess is he'll take it, 3 to 5 years for embezzlement and fraud. You'll get the house, which is already in your name. Full custody is guaranteed, majority of marital assets. Marcus added, Jenny, you executed this perfectly. I've been doing forensic accounting for 20 years. I've never seen someone document a case this thoroughly. Jenny touched her belly, feeling Lucas kick. Did you hear that, baby boy? It's over. You're safe. We're safe. John's arraignment is Thursday, Washington continued. He'll likely plead guilty to avoid trial. This should all be wrapped up within 30 days. Then you can focus on being a mother and moving on with your life. For the first time in weeks, Jenny smiled genuinely. The weight on her chest began to lift. She'd done it. She protected her son. She'd escaped a toxic marriage. She'd held a criminal accountable. Go home and rest, Washington said kindly. You've been through hell. Let the legal system handle it from here. Jenny left the office feeling lighter than she had in months. The autumn air felt crisp and clean. She stopped at a cafe and ordered a decaf latte, something she hadn't allowed herself during the investigation. She called her sister and shared the news. It's finally over, she said. John's going to plead out. Lucas and I will be free. That night, Jenny slept soundly for the first time since finding the hotel receipt. She dreamed of her son's future, of the life they'd build together, of new beginnings. She had no idea that Thursday would bring devastation instead of victory. Thursday morning, Jenny sat in the courtroom gallery, 7 months pregnant and radiant with what she thought was impending victory. John was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, unshaven and defeated looking. Then his lawyer walked in, and Jenny's stomach dropped. Victoria Crane was a legend in New York legal circles. 45 years old, razor sharp, and nicknamed the Shredder for her ability to destroy opposing cases. She was expensive, aggressive, and had a reputation for winning unwinnable cases through sheer ruthlessness. Judge Patricia Morrison, a fair but tough family court veteran, called the court to order. Mr. Walker, you're charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, and theft. How do you plead? John stood. Victoria stood beside him, her posture radiating confidence. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Washington leaned toward Jenny, whispering urgently, what is she doing? Victoria continued, her voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, we're filing a motion to dismiss. The evidence was obtained illegally. Oh, Jenny felt the blood drain from her face. Your Honor, Victoria went on, we have evidence that Mrs. Jennifer Walker illegally accessed my client's private accounts, hacked his phone, and conducted unlawful surveillance. Every piece of evidence is fruit of the poisonous tree. Inadmissible. Washington jumped to his feet. Your Honor, Mrs. Walker acted with proper authorization from her husband's employer, Victoria interrupted smoothly, who had no authority to grant her access to her husband's personal devices, personal accounts, or personal communications. This was a vendetta disguised as an investigation. Judge Morrison frowned. I'm ordering an evidentiary hearing for next week. Until then, bail is set at $500,000. Someone in the gallery, John's brother Jenny realized, immediately stood. I'll post bail, Your Honor. Within an hour, John walked out of the courthouse, free. Jenny sat frozen in her seat, watching the man who'd betrayed her walk away smiling. Washington put a hand on her shoulder. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. That evening, Washington called Jenny with worse news. Victoria Crane is claiming we violated John's Fourth Amendment rights, he explained over the phone. Harrison authorized you to investigate firm misconduct, not John's personal life. She's arguing there's a legal distinction. So all my evidence, Jenny's voice broke, could be thrown out. If that happens, the criminal case falls apart. Jenny's hands shook. What about the divorce? Civil court has different rules, but Jenny... Washington paused, and Jenny knew something terrible was coming. John filed an emergency custody motion this afternoon. What? Jenny stood so fast her vision blurred. He's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you conducted an illegal surveillance campaign, that you're paranoid, vindictive, and pose a danger to the child. That's insane. I'm the victim here. I know, but Victoria is very good at flipping narratives. She's arguing that you orchestrated everything, that you hacked John's accounts to manufacture evidence, that you're having some kind of pregnancy-induced psychological break. Jenny felt the room spinning. No one will believe that. Jenny, Washington said gently, John has money now. His family posted bail. They're paying for Victoria Crane. She's arguing that since you initiated everything, changed the locks, called the police, got him arrested, that you're the aggressor. The weight returned to Jenny's chest, heavier than before. Emergency custody hearing is Monday, Washington continued. If she convinces the judge you're unstable, they could take my baby, Jenny finished, her voice barely a whisper. After hanging up, Jenny sat in the hotel suite, staring at the wall. Her carefully constructed plan was unraveling. The victory she'd thought she'd won was slipping through her fingers. She looked down at her pregnant belly, at the son she had fought so hard to protect. No, she said aloud to the empty room. No, this is not happening. Not after everything we've been through. But even as she said the words, fear wrapped around her heart like a fist. Because Jenny Walker was learning a hard truth. Sometimes the system doesn't protect the victim. Sometimes the villain gets to fight back. And sometimes winning the first battle means nothing when you're about to lose the war. The emergency custody hearing began on Monday morning in a packed courtroom. News of the case had spread, and reporters filled the gallery. Jenny sat in the front row, 7 months pregnant, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Victoria Crane stood before Judge Carolyn Foster, a family court veteran with 20 years on the bench. Victoria's opening statement was masterful in its manipulation. Your Honor, my client is the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment by his estranged wife. Mrs. Walker conducted illegal surveillance, hacked his personal accounts, and weaponized law enforcement against him. Victoria presented her evidence methodically. Proof that Jenny had accessed John's phone location without explicit permission for surveillance purposes. Testimony from neighbors about Jenny's obsessive tracking, psychological arguments about vindictive behavior. Your Honor, Mr. Walker's only crime was a lapse in judgment, an affair which, while morally wrong, is not illegal. Mrs. Walker's response has been disproportionate, illegal, and suggests severe emotional instability. Washington Reed stood to respond. Your Honor, Mrs. Walker discovered her husband was not only cheating but stealing. She acted reasonably to protect herself and her unborn child. By getting her husband arrested on trumped-up charges, Victoria shot back. The charges aren't trumped up. We'll see when the criminal judge throws out all the illegally obtained evidence. Victoria turned her attention to Jenny directly. Mrs. Walker, isn't it true you've been tracking your husband's location for months? Jenny kept her voice steady. I used Find My iPhone, which he gave me access to when we set up our family account. Without his knowledge that you were actively surveilling him, I was trying to understand where he was when he said he was working late. Yes or no, Mrs. Walker? Did he know you were tracking him? Jenny's jaw clenched. No. And isn't it true you contacted his employer to get him fired? I reported his embezzlement of $380,000. Alleged embezzlement, which may not even be admissible. You destroyed his career based on evidence you may have obtained illegally. Jenny's composure cracked. He was stealing. He was using company money to fund an affair while I was pregnant with his child. So this is about revenge, Victoria pressed. This is about justice. Justice, Mrs. Walker, or rage? Washington objected, but the damage was done. Victoria painted a picture of an emotionally unstable woman conducting a vendetta, not a victim seeking protection. Judge Foster's expression was unreadable. I'm ordering psychological evaluations for both parties. And until that's complete, she paused, and Jenny felt her world tilt. The child, when born, will be placed in temporary foster care pending evaluation. No, Jenny shot to her feet with a hand protectively over her belly. You can't take my baby. He's the criminal. Mrs. Walker, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. Washington pulled Jenny back into her seat, but she was shaking uncontrollably. Across the courtroom, John allowed himself a tiny smirk of satisfaction. Judge Foster continued, this is a precautionary measure. Both parents will undergo evaluation. The child's welfare is paramount. Jenny heard nothing else. Her ears were ringing. They were going to take her baby. After everything she'd done, everything she'd sacrificed, they were going to take Lucas away. That night, alone in her hotel room, Jenny paced the floor, unable to sleep or eat. Desperation drove her to call her mother despite knowing how the conversation would go. Mom, it's Jenny. I need you. Her mother's voice was cold. Jennifer, I told you not to call unless you come to your senses. Mom, they're trying to take my baby away. Because you're acting insane. I read what you did. Getting your husband arrested, publicly humiliating him. This isn't how a wife behaves. Jenny's voice broke. He was cheating on me. He stole money. Men make mistakes, Jennifer. You forgive them. You don't destroy them. Your father had affairs. I didn't ruin his life. The words hit Jenny like a slap. You knew? About Dad? A wife's job is to keep the family together, not tear it apart for revenge. You're being selfish. Selfish? Mom, he stole money to pay for his mistress while I was pregnant. I won't support this vendetta. When you're ready to be an adult and save your marriage, call me. The line went dead. Jenny collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. Not just for the betrayal of her husband, but for the realization that her own mother valued appearances over her daughter's well-being. That she'd watched her father cheat and stayed silent. That Jenny had been raised by a woman who believed suffering in silence was virtue. A sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Jenny gasped, hand flying to her belly. Another contraction followed, stronger than the first. No, she whispered. Not now, please, not now. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. At 2 a.m. in the emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital, Dr. Sarah Rahman examined Jenny with gentle efficiency. Your stress levels have triggered early labor at 35 weeks, the doctor said. We need to deliver tonight. Jenny's eyes widened with fear. Is the baby okay? He's small but should be fine. 5 weeks early isn't ideal, but we have an excellent NICU. But Jenny, you need to calm down. Stress is dangerous for both of you. They're taking him, Jenny whispered, tears streaming down her face. The court is taking my baby as soon as he's born. Dr. Rahman's expression shifted from professional to shocked. What? They say I'm unstable, that I'm vindictive. As soon as he's born, social services is taking him to foster care. Another contraction hit. Dr. Rahman held Jenny's hand through it, then looked her directly in the eyes. Right now, you focus on bringing your son into this world safely. We'll deal with everything else after. Okay? Jenny nodded, but terror consumed her. Because she knew that in a few hours, she'd hold her son for the first time. And then she'd have to let him go. At 4:47 a.m., Lucas Walker entered the world with a strong cry. 5 pounds, 6 ounces. Perfect in every way. Dr. Rahman placed him in Jenny's arms, and for 2 hours, Jenny memorized every detail of her son's face. His dark eyes, his tiny fingers that wrapped around hers, the way he fit perfectly against her chest. Hi, sweet boy, she whispered. I'm your mama. I'm so sorry this is how you are coming into the world. But I promise you, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to protect you. Lucas gripped her finger with surprising strength, as if trying to hold on. At 6:45 a.m., a social worker arrived. Helen Morrison was in her 50s, kind-faced but bound by the court order she carried. Mrs. Walker, I'm so sorry, I have the court order. Jenny held Lucas tighter, her whole body trembling. Please don't do this. He'll be placed with a licensed foster family. You'll have supervised visits twice a week, 2 hours each time. He needs his mother! Jenny's voice rose to a scream. Hospital security appeared in the doorway. Dr. Rahman stepped between them and Jenny, but there was nothing she could do. I'm sorry, Mrs. Walker. The order is immediate. Jenny had to physically hand over her newborn son. The moment Lucas left her arms, something inside her shattered. She screamed, a sound of pure anguish that echoed through the maternity ward. Security had to restrain her. Dr. Rahman administered a sedative. Jenny's last conscious image was of Helen Morrison carrying Lucas out of the room, his tiny hand reaching back toward his mother. When Jenny woke hours later, her arms were empty. Her son was gone. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she wondered if fighting back had been worth the bond. Jenny lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, sedated but not sleeping. Her arms ached with the phantom weight of her son. She'd held him for 2 hours. 2 hours out of what should have been a lifetime. The door opened. Washington Reed entered, but he wasn't alone. Jenny, there's someone here to see you, he said gently. The woman who entered was striking, 60 years old, elegantly dressed with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Jenny recognized her from newspaper photos. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Margaret Blackstone," the woman said. "Harrison's wife." Jenny's voice came out hollow. "Did you come to gloat?" Margaret pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "I came to help. John Walker stole from my husband's firm, from clients who trusted us, from people who deserved better. We want him destroyed just as much as you do. They took my baby." "I know, and we're going to get him back." Jenny finally looked at her. "How?" Margaret leaned forward, and her expression was fierce. "I was a prosecutor for 25 years. I put away rapists, murderers, and white-collar criminals. You know what I learned? The legal system doesn't always deliver justice. Sometimes you have to force it to. The judge believes John. She thinks I'm the unstable one. Because Victoria Crane is very good at her job, but she's not infallible." Margaret's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm going to prove John Walker isn't just a cheater and a thief. We're going to prove he's dangerous." Washington spoke up. "Margaret has resources, private investigators, forensic psychologists, expert witnesses. The Blackstones are willing to fund your entire legal battle." Jenny pushed herself up in bed, ignoring the pain. "Why would you do this for me?" Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Because Victoria Crane destroyed my sister 10 years ago in a custody case. Used every dirty trick in the book. She took my sister's children and gave them to an abusive father because he had more money. I've been waiting for a chance to beat her ever since." She reached out and took Jenny's hand. "Also, I like you. You remind me of myself 30 years ago, and I'll be damned if I let some criminal take your baby." For the first time since the hearing, Jenny felt a spark of hope. "What do we do?" "We investigate John like he's a serial killer," Margaret said, "because I'd bet everything I own that this isn't his first time." 1 week later, Margaret had assembled a team in a conference room at Blackstone and Associates. Jenny sat at the table, released from the hospital, but still recovering. Around her were the people Margaret had recruited. Detective Frank Russo, 55, retired NYPD with 30 years of experience. Dr. Claire Bennett, a forensic psychologist who specialized in coercive control. Marcus Pemberton, still on the case. And Samantha Collins, a 32-year-old digital forensics expert. Margaret stood at the head of the table like a general addressing troops before battle. "John Walker is a narcissist, a thief, and possibly worse. We're going to find everything: his past, his patterns, his victims. Washington, what do we have?" Washington projected John's employment history on the screen. 3 firms in 8 years. Morrison and Clark from 2015 to 2017. Pearson and Associates from 2017 to 2019. Then Blackstone. That's unusual for someone on partnership track. Detective Russo made notes. "I'll contact the previous firms, see why he really left." Dr. Bennett presented her psychological evaluation. "John passed the court-ordered evaluation, but barely. He shows markers consistent with narcissistic personality disorder. Grandiosity, lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, tendency to blame others." Samantha Collins pulled up phone records. "I've been analyzing John's digital footprint. He has a burner phone, second number active for 3 years. Jenny, who'd been silent, finally spoke. 3 years? My affair with Carrie was only 6 months. Exactly, Samantha said, which means Carrie wasn't his first mistress. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Margaret smiled grimly. Then let's find the others. Over the next 72 hours, Detective Russo made calls, conducted interviews, and unearthed John Walker's history of predation. At Morrison and Clark, senior partner Diane Morrison was uncomfortable but forthcoming. John left after an incident with a paralegal named Rachel Cooper. She got pregnant. He convinced her to have an abortion, then had her fired for performance issues. She sued us for wrongful termination. We settled quietly and let John resign. At Pearson and Associates, HR Director Thomas Garrett was more direct. There were rumors about John and a junior associate, Lauren Mitchell. When she ended the relationship, money started disappearing from her cases. We couldn't prove John did it, but we gave him a choice: leave voluntarily or face investigation. Russo tracked down both women. Rachel Cooper, now 33, was working as a legal secretary in Boston. Lauren Mitchell, 36, was an assistant district attorney in Manhattan. Both agreed to testify. When Russo reported back, Jenny sat stunned. He did this before? To other women? Not just before, Margaret said. John Walker has a pattern. He targets younger women in subordinate positions, gets them pregnant, pressures them to terminate, then destroys their careers if they don't comply. Dr. Bennett added clinical weight to the pattern. This isn't infidelity. This is predatory behavior. And Mrs. Walker, you're the first victim who kept the baby. That's why he panicked. He'd never had to face consequences before. Jenny's hands shook. When I got pregnant this time, by accident, he was so cold. So I thought it was work stress. He was planning his exit, Margaret said, hiding money, setting up his affair with Carrie as a transition relationship. You were supposed to miss Carrie or be pressured into termination like the others. Samantha Collins pulled up more evidence. John's burner phone has calls to an obstetrics clinic in New Jersey. Carrie Delacroix has a 14-week ultrasound scheduled for next week. Jenny stood abruptly. Carrie's pregnant, and she didn't tell him? According to her appointment records, yes, Samantha confirmed. We need to talk to her, Jenny said. They found Carrie in a cramped apartment in Queens. She'd been hiding since her testimony at John's criminal trial, living low profile, trying to stay off everyone's radar. When Detective Russo brought her to Margaret's office, it was the first time Jenny and Carrie had been in the same room. The silence was thick with tension. Finally, Jenny spoke. Are you pregnant? Carrie's eyes widened. Are you keeping it? That's none of your business. It is my business, Jenny said firmly, because John will pressure you to terminate. Then he'll destroy your life. That's his pattern. Carrie sat down slowly. I know. Margaret leaned forward. Has he already asked you to? 3 times. He said a baby would complicate his legal situation, that I'd be doing us both a favor. Did he offer to pay for it? Jenny asked. Carrie pulled out her phone and played a recording. John's voice filled the room. Carrie, sweetheart, be reasonable. A baby right now ruins everything. I'll give you $10,000. You take care of it. We both move on. What if I want to keep it? Carrie's recorded voice asked. Then you're on your own, and I'll make sure no one believes anything you say about me. I'm very good at destroying women's credibility. Ask Rachel or Lauren. The recording ended. No one spoke for a long moment. Jenny finally broke the silence. You recorded that to blackmail him. Carrie didn't deny it. Yes, but you're willing to use it to help me instead? Carrie looked down at her hands. I've done a lot of terrible things, Mrs. Walker. To a lot of women, but watching John try to take your baby. She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. I can't be part of that. Are you keeping your baby? Jenny asked again, more gently this time. Yes, it's a girl, and I'm terrified because I have no money, no support, and a criminal record, but I'm keeping her. Jenny stood and walked to where Carrie sat. She extended her hand. Help us destroy him, and I'll help you. Job references, child care connections, a fresh start. You help me get my son back. I'll help you build a life for your daughter. Carrie stared at Jenny's hand. Why would you do that? Because John wants us to hate each other, wants us to destroy each other, and I'm done doing what John Walker wants. After a moment, Carrie took Jenny's hand and shook it. Margaret watched the exchange with satisfaction. Then let's get to work. We have a monster to cage. 4 days later, the emergency custody modification hearing reconvened in family court. The gallery was packed with media and spectators. This case had become a national story. The pregnant wife versus the cheating, embezzling husband. Jenny sat in the front row, flanked by Washington Reed and Margaret Blackstone, who'd officially joined the legal team. She looked stronger now, more focused. She'd spent every waking hour preparing for this moment. Judge Foster called the court to order. Ms. Reed, you called this hearing. What new evidence do you have? Washington stood. Your Honor, we have new evidence regarding Mr. Walker's fitness as a parent and his pattern of predatory behavior toward women. Victoria Crane objected immediately. Your Honor, this is harassment. Ms. Crane, you'll have your turn, Judge Foster said firmly. Ms. Reed, proceed. Washington called Rachel Cooper to the stand first. The 33-year-old walked to the witness box with visible nervousness but determination in her eyes. Under Washington's questioning, Rachel testified about her affair with John at Morrison and Clark, the pregnancy, John's pressure to terminate, and being fired immediately afterward. "He told me the abortion was for both our careers," Rachel said, her voice steady despite tears. "2 days later, he had HR accuse me of stealing office supplies. I was fired within a week." Victoria Crane's cross-examination was brutal. "Ms. Cooper, you signed a non-disclosure agreement, correct?" "Yes." "So you're breaching a legal contract to be here?" "Yes, because what he did was wrong. Or because you're angry about a consensual relationship that ended badly." Rachel met Victoria's eyes. "He didn't just end a relationship, Ms. Crane. He ended my career." Lauren Mitchell testified next. As an assistant district attorney, she had more confidence on the stand, and her testimony was devastating. "John Walker is a predator," she said flatly. "He targets women in vulnerable positions, younger, less powerful, professionally dependent on him. I was 28 when he pursued me. I got pregnant. He convinced me to terminate, then made my life at the firm unbearable until I left." Victoria tried to discredit her. "Ms. Mitchell, you have a pending lawsuit against Pearson and Associates. Financial motivation?" Lauren's response was sharp. "I'm an assistant district attorney, Ms. Crane. I prosecute criminals. Your client is a criminal." Then Carrie took the stand. Her testimony was the most damaging because she had recordings, hours of them. John admitting to embezzlement, John bragging about manipulating his wife, John discussing how to destroy women's credibility. But the most devastating moment came when Carrie played the recording about her pregnancy. John's voice filled the courtroom. "I'm very good at destroying women's credibility. Ask Rachel or Lauren." The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Foster had to bang her gavel for order. Victoria's cross-examination focused on Carrie's past. "You're a con artist, correct, Ms. Anderson?" "I was." "You target wealthy married men?" "I did." "So everything you say is a suspect?" Carrie's answer was perfect. "Everything I say is recorded, Ms. Crane. That's how you protect yourself from men like John Walker. You document everything." Finally, Claire Bennett took the stand as an expert witness. She presented a pattern analysis that was clinical and damning. "Mr. Walker exhibits classic patterns of a coercive controller," she testified. "Target, younger woman in subordinate position. Method, charm, gifts, promises. Pregnancy, immediate pressure to terminate. Outcome, career destruction if woman doesn't comply. Frequency, every 2 to 3 years over an 8-year period." She looked directly at the judge. "This isn't infidelity, Your Honor. This is predatory behavior. Mrs. Walker is the first victim who refused to comply with his demands." When Dr. Bennett stepped down, the courtroom was silent. Victoria Crane knew she was losing. She played her final card, putting John Walker on the stand. John had been coached. He wore a somber suit, looked appropriately remorseful, and delivered his lines perfectly. "I've made mistakes," he said. "I cheated on my wife. I handled relationships poorly, but I never coerced anyone. Those women made their own choices." Victoria led him through a sympathetic narrative, but then Margaret Blackstone stood for cross-examination, and everything changed. "Your Honor," Margaret said, "I'd like to question the witness." Victoria looked worried. "Your Honor, this is irregular." "Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Blackstone." Margaret approached John like a predator approaching prey. She asked about the timeline of his marriage, the hidden money transfers, the changed life insurance beneficiary. Then she asked the question that destroyed him. "Mr. Walker, did you love your wife?" "Of course I." "When did you stop loving her?" "I never stopped." "Then why are you trying to take her baby? If you love her, why destroy her?" John's mask slipped. "She destroyed me. She got me arrested, fired, humiliated." "So this is about revenge?" John realized his mistake too late. "No, you just meant that you're angry your wife held you accountable?" "She went too far." Margaret pressed harder. "How far is too far, Mr. Walker?" Should she have ignored the embezzlement? Ignored you targeting multiple women and destroying their careers? John exploded. Those women made their own choices, and my wife is a vindictive bitch who ruined my life. The courtroom erupted. Victoria tried to stop him, but John was spiraling. You want the truth? She was boring and needy and pathetic. The pregnancy was an accident. I never wanted the kid. Jenny sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, because everyone was finally seeing who John Walker really was. Margaret's voice was calm and deadly. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Foster called a 10-minute recess. When she returned, her expression was granite. Mr. Walker, she began, I've presided over family court for 17 years. I've seen terrible fathers, but rarely have I seen someone so thoroughly demolish their own case. She looked at John with undisguised disgust. You've proven through your own testimony that you're vindictive, rageful, and have no genuine interest in your child's welfare. Your custody petition is denied. The gallery erupted in cheers. Furthermore, I'm awarding full legal and physical custody to Jennifer Walker, effective immediately. Mr. Walker, you will have no visitation rights pending completion of anger management therapy and psychological evaluation, which I'm ordering to be extensive. John tried to protest, but the judge wasn't finished. I'm also referring this testimony to the criminal court. Your statements constitute admission of reproductive coercion, which is a crime in New York State. Bailiff, take Mr. Walker into custody for contempt of court. As John was led away in handcuffs, screaming obscenities, Jenny collapsed into Washington's arms, sobbing with relief. Mrs. Walker, Judge Foster said gently, your son will be returned to you today. I apologize for what you've endured. 3 hours later, Jenny held Lucas again. He was 2 weeks old, had spent 9 days in foster care, but he was healthy and perfect. Hi, baby, Jenny whispered. Mama's here. I've got you now. We're going home. 6 weeks after the custody hearing, John Walker stood in federal court to face his criminal charges. With the evidence against him overwhelming and his public meltdown making any jury trial unwinnable, he took a plea deal. 3 years in federal prison for embezzlement, 2 additional years for reproductive coercion to run concurrently. Restitution of $380,000 plus damages. Permanent disbarment from practicing law. Jenny sat in the gallery holding 3-month-old Lucas and watched John be led away in handcuffs. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure. The divorce was finalized the same week. Jenny received the house, which had always been in her name. 60% of John's retirement account, alimony of $5,000 per month for 3 years, child support of $3,500 per month until Lucas turned 18. John would have no visitation rights for a minimum of 5 years. After that, he could petition for supervised visits only. Rachel Cooper and Lauren Mitchell both received settlements from their former law firms. Not enough to undo the damage to their careers, but enough to provide some measure of justice. Rachel returned to law school. Lauren was promoted to senior assistant district attorney. Carrie Anderson, as she now called herself again, gave birth to a daughter she named Lily. Margaret Blackstone hired her as a paralegal at the firm, with benefits and childcare support. Carrie attended AA meetings twice a week and therapy sessions every Thursday. She was 14 months sober and working toward her law degree at night. Sometimes on Saturday afternoons, Jenny and Carrie would meet at the park with their children. They weren't friends exactly. Too much history stood between them, but they understood each other in a way no one else could. Do you ever regret it? Carrie asked one autumn day, watching Lucas toddle after falling leaves. Everything you did to him? Jenny thought for a long moment. No, not for a second. Even though it cost you so much, it cost me everything I'd built on lies, Jenny said quietly. But I got the truth, and I got him. She watched Lucas laugh as he caught a leaf. That's worth more than any marriage ever was. Carrie nodded, bouncing Lily on her lap. Margaret offered me a permanent position, paralegal, full benefits, even help with daycare. You should take it. I don't deserve it. Jenny looked at her directly. Yes, you do. We both deserve second chances. The difference is we're taking ours. 1 year after the custody hearing, Jenny stood in her new office. The sign on the door read, Walker Investigations, Jennifer Walker, Certified Forensic Examiner. We find what they're hiding. Her firm specialized in uncovering financial fraud and divorce cases. In its first year, she'd helped 127 women document abuse, hidden assets, and financial crimes. Each client received the same thorough, methodical approach that had saved Jenny's own life. The office walls were covered with photos of her clients, women who'd fought back and won, women who'd escaped, women who'd protected their children. Lucas, now almost 2 years old, played with blocks in the corner. He was healthy, happy, and had no memory of the chaos surrounding his birth. A knock on the door pulled Jenny from her thoughts. A woman in her mid-30s entered, holding a folder with shaking hands. Mrs. Walker, I'm Sarah Thompson. I think my husband is stealing from his company, and I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do. Jenny looked at her and saw herself 2 years ago, scared, pregnant, betrayed, but also determined. Sit down, Sarah, Jenny said warmly. You're in the right place. As she began reviewing Sarah's evidence, Jenny thought about how far she'd come. From the naive wife who'd waited at cold dinner tables to the woman who'd systematically dismantled a predator's life. From victim to victor to advocate. She glanced at Lucas, who looked up from his blocks and gave her a gap-toothed grin. This was what justice looked like. Not courtroom victories or prison sentences, though those mattered. Real justice was in the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage, in the son she'd protected, in the women she helped every day. On her desk sat a framed quote she'd had made, "Sometimes changing the locks is just the beginning." Jenny Walker had changed more than locks. She'd changed her entire life. And she'd made sure that John Walker could never hurt another woman again. That was worth everything. 3 years after her divorce, Jenny sat in a television studio in Manhattan, waiting to be interviewed about her best-selling book, Locked Out: How I Took Back My Life. Lucas, now 4 years old, was with his aunt for the afternoon. The book had become a phenomenon. It told Jenny's story in unflinching detail, the betrayal, the investigation, the legal battles, and ultimately, the victory. But more than that, it had become a handbook for women facing similar situations. The morning show host, Patricia Reynolds, greeted Jenny with genuine warmth. Your book has sold over 2 million copies. Women across the country are calling you a hero. How does that feel? Jenny smiled, but there was weight behind it. I'm not a hero, Patricia. I'm just a woman who refused to be a victim. The real heroes are the women who read the book and find the courage to leave dangerous situations. Speaking of which, your foundation has helped how many women now? 512, Jenny said. The Walker Foundation provides free forensic accounting services to women who suspect financial abuse or hidden assets. We've uncovered over $40 million in concealed wealth and helped secure safe futures for hundreds of families. Patricia leaned forward. Your ex-husband, Jonathan Walker, is currently serving his sentence. He's eligible for parole next year. How do you feel about that? Jenny's expression didn't change. Jonathan Walker has been denied parole twice already. If he's released, he'll still have no rights to contact Lucas. And I'll continue doing what I do, helping other women avoid the trap I fell into. You're not afraid of him? No, Jenny said simply. Fear is what kept me paralyzed for months, waiting at dinner tables for a husband who didn't deserve my patience. I'm done being afraid. After the interview, Jenny drove to Margaret Blackstone's office. The older woman had become a mentor, a friend, and Lucas's honorary grandmother. You did well on TV, Margaret said, pouring them both coffee. Though you were more restrained than I would have been. Jenny laughed. You wanted me to call him a monster on national television? I wanted you to call him what he is. But you took the high road, which is probably better for book sales. They reviewed cases together. Margaret still practiced family law, and she and Jenny often collaborated. Then Margaret pulled out a folder Jenny hadn't seen before. I have something to show you, Margaret said. Remember Victoria Crane? Jenny's expression cooled. John's lawyer. How could I forget? She's been disbarred. Turns out she'd been bribing expert witnesses in multiple cases. The state bar finally caught her. Jenny felt a complex mix of emotions. I won't say I'm sorry to hear that. My sister, the one Victoria destroyed 10 years ago, just won custody of her children back. The father's abuse was finally proven. She called me this morning. crying with relief. Margaret's eyes were bright with unshed tears. So thank you, Jenny. By beating Victoria in your case, you exposed her methods. Other victims came forward. Justice took its time, but it arrived. Jenny reached across the desk and squeezed Margaret's hand. We helped each other. That's what women do when we stop competing and start collaborating. That evening, Jenny sat in her backyard with Lucas, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. It was the same garden where her father had built a swing years ago. The same house where her marriage had died. But it felt different now, lighter, warmer, more like home. Mama, tell me about my daddy, Lucas said suddenly. Jenny had been preparing for this question for 4 years. She'd rehearsed her answer with therapists, discussed it with Margaret, and prayed she'd say the right thing. Your daddy made some bad choices, she said carefully. He hurt people, including me. That's why he's not here. Is he a bad man? Jenny considered this. The easy answer was yes, but Lucas deserved better than easy answers. He's a person who did bad things, she said. And when you do bad things, there are consequences. Your daddy has to face those consequences. Will I be like him? Jenny turned Lucas to face her, looking into eyes that were so much like her own. No, baby, you are not your father's mistakes. You're not his sins. You're mine. And I will spend every day showing you what real love looks like, what integrity looks like, what being a good person means. Lucas seemed satisfied with this answer. He hugged her tightly, then ran off to chase fireflies that were beginning to emerge in the twilight. Jenny's phone buzzed. A text from Carrie. Lily just said her first word. It was Mama. I cried for an hour. Thank you for giving me a chance to be here for this. Jenny smiled and texted back, you earned that chance. Proud of you. Another text came through, this one from Rachel Cooper. Just passed the bar exam, starting at Morrison & Clark next month. Same firm that fired me. But this time I'm coming back as an attorney. Full circle. And then Lauren Mitchell. Convicted that serial abuser today. Life sentence. Thought you'd want to know that justice keeps happening. Jenny looked at her phone, at these messages from women who'd all been victims of the same man, who'd all found ways to rebuild their lives. Not despite what happened to them, but strengthened by it. She thought about how much had changed, how the woman who'd sat at a cold dinner table 3 years ago, tracking her husband's location with tears in her eyes, seemed like a completely different person. That woman had been afraid. This woman was not. That woman had waited for someone else to fix her life. This woman fixed things herself. That woman had been a victim. This woman was a force of nature. At the same time, in a medium-security federal prison in Pennsylvania, Jonathan Walker sat in his cell staring at the ceiling. He'd been denied parole again last month. His mother no longer took his calls. His brother had moved away and changed his number. The lawyers he'd once called colleagues had forgotten he existed. He'd spent 3 years in prison thinking about Jenny, about how she'd outsmarted him, how she'd systematically destroyed everything he'd built. In the beginning, he'd been angry, bitter, convinced he was the victim of a vindictive woman's rage. But 3 years was a long time. 3 years of mandatory therapy sessions. 3 years of group counseling with other men who'd abused their power. 3 years of watching Jenny's success on the news, her book, her foundation, her new life. Slowly, painfully, John had begun to understand what he'd done. Not the legal crimes. He'd always known those were wrong, even as he committed them. But the deeper betrayal, the way he'd used women and discarded them, the way he'd viewed his wife as a possession rather than a person, the way he'd thrown away something real and precious for something that was never more than ego and entitlement. His cellmate, Eddie, was serving 5 years for fraud. They'd become something like friends, though John had learned in prison that friendship was a relative term. You ever think about writing to your kid? Eddie asked one night. John had thought about it, constantly. The court order says I can't contact him until he's 18. Even then, he probably won't want to hear from me. Maybe, Eddie said, but maybe he deserves to know you're sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what I broke. No, Eddie agreed, but it's a start. John pulled out the pen and paper he'd been avoiding for 3 years. He began to write. Dear Lucas, you don't know me, and you probably never will, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Sorry for everything I did to hurt your mother. Sorry for not being the father you deserved. Sorry for the choices I made that meant you grew up without me. Your mother is an amazing woman. She's strong and brilliant and brave. Listen to her. Learn from her. Be nothing like me. I hope someday you'll have a chance to read this and understand that some mistakes can't be fixed, but they can be learned from. I hope you learn from mine, your father, Jonathan O. Walker. He folded the letter and put it in an envelope addressed to himself. The prison didn't allow him to send mail to Lucas. Court order, but John kept the letter anyway. Maybe someday, when Lucas was old enough, John could give it to him. Or maybe not. Maybe Lucas would be better off never knowing the man who'd abandoned him before he was born. Either way, John Walker had learned the hardest lesson of his life. Actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences last forever. 5 years after changing the locks, Jenny stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a congressional committee about financial abuse in divorce cases. Lucas, now 7 years old, sat in the gallery with Margaret, watching his mother advocate for stronger protections for women. Financial abuse is intimate partner violence, Jenny testified. When someone hides assets, steals from joint accounts, or uses money as a weapon to control their partner, that's abuse. And we need laws that recognize it as such. The committee listened. Several members took notes. And when Jenny finished, they gave her a standing ovation. Outside the Capitol building afterward, a reporter asked her the inevitable question, "Do you consider yourself a feminist icon?" Jenny laughed. "I consider myself a woman who got tired of waiting for someone else to save her. If that makes me an icon, then we need to raise our standards." What would you say to women who are in situations similar to what you faced? Jenny looked directly into the camera. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Don't wait for permission to protect yourself. And remember, you are not crazy for noticing that something is wrong. You are smart for paying attention. And your ex-husband, any message for him? Jenny's smile was cool. Jonathan Walker is serving the consequences of his choices. I have nothing more to say to him. I have a son to raise, women to help, and a life to live. He's not part of any of that. That night, back in her house in Westchester, the house that had witnessed the death of her marriage and the birth of her strength, Jenny tucked Lucas into bed. "Mama, was today important?" he asked. "Very important, baby. Today we helped make sure other kids don't have to go through what we went through. Because their daddies made bad choices? Because everyone deserves to be safe, and sometimes making people safe means changing the rules." Lucas thought about this, then asked the question Jenny had been dreading. "Do you think my daddy loves me?" Jenny sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "I think your daddy wishes he had made better choices so he could know you. But love isn't just a feeling, Lucas. Love is action. Love is showing up. Love is putting someone else first. Like you do. Like I try to do every day." Lucas hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweet boy. More than anything in this world." After Lucas fell asleep, Jenny stood in his doorway, watching him breathe. This child, who she'd fought so hard to protect, was growing up safe, loved, and surrounded by people who chose him every day. She thought about the night she'd sat at that cold dinner table, tracking John's phone, making the decision that would change everything. People sometimes asked if she regretted how things had turned out. The answer was always the same. No, she didn't regret divorcing John. She didn't regret exposing his crimes. She didn't regret the difficult years that followed, the custody battle, the stress of single motherhood, because all of it had led here, to Lucas sleeping peacefully, to a career helping other women, to a life built on truth instead of lies. Jenny Walker had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is change the locks and start over. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, raising your child with integrity, building something meaningful from the rubble of what broke you. They say changing the locks is just the beginning. Jenny Walker had proven it was also the revolution.